Hello everyone, I'm Gemma Beall. Welcome to Beyond Second Cognition. We've gotten quite a few new subscribers since Endel has begun producing the QAnon podcast. With this in mind, I would like to take the opportunity to welcome everyone to the channel and give all our new subscribers a little background into us and this channel. For all of our loyal subscribers, this will be a rehash for you, but it's a beneficial rehash of things you might have overlooked or forgotten. For those of our loyal subscribers that are familiar with the bulk of our work, please feel free to chime in if I forget something. The title of this presentation is The Psychology Behind the War. And what I mean when I say this is I'm going to address a lot of the psychological manipulation of human consciousness that is not apparent in most people's minds because it is so subtle and such a part of the displayed human nature that most people do not see it. This is information that Endel and I have been sharing over the last 4 years through the books, videos, and podcasts. Most of the new subscribers don't know that I'm a huge fan of defining words. In my book Advanced Teachings, I talk about how many times there are miscommunications between people because words don't mean what they think that they mean, or the meaning that one person holds is different from another than the actual definition. So if you will humor me for a bit, there are some words I want to define here so you all understand what I mean when I speak these words. Statement. A statement is defined as a definite or clear expression of something. A question. A question is defined as a sentence worded or expressed as to elicit information. A statement is not a question, and throwing a question mark at the end of a sentence also is not a question. Obfuscation. God, I have so much trouble with that word. An obfuscation is the action of making something obscure, unclear, or unintelligible. Succinct means briefly and clearly expressed. Opinion. An opinion is a viewpoint or judgment formed about something, not necessarily based on fact or knowledge. That last part is very important to understand about opinions. Obtuse is defined as annoyingly insensitive or slow to understand. Entitlement mentality. Entitlement mentality is defined as a state of mind in which an individual comes to believe that privileges are instead rights, and that they are to be expected as a matter of course. Last but not least, and my favorite, observation. Observation is the action or process of observing something or someone carefully in order to gain information. Endel has over 30 years of research and study into law, psychology, history, and also getting drawn into religion and the New Age and the Patriot movement back a long time ago. I have about 20 years of studying human behavior, academic psychology, the law, and also getting drawn into religion and the New Age. Now, on our channel, we have set the format in order to share what we have experienced and learned on our life path and where we grew past the psychological control and emotional manipulation of and by the world around us. We are not trying to set ourselves up as experts or gurus for others to follow. We are sharing our experiences, thoughts, and insights, and occasionally our personal opinions to give others a different perspective to consider so they too can grow themselves beyond this control. And nothing more. We are not here to hold people's hands or to tell them what to do, think, or believe. We promote personal responsibility, personal growth, and expansion, especially in the cognitive arena. Because we are here specifically to give others a different perspective to consider, we do not share in depth any personal observations or insights so others can do their own research, observation, contemplation, and expand themselves with their own insights and observations, not ours. What we share, when we share it, are our perspectives at that point in time with the information we've observed, and as we grow and expand and gain more information, that perspective and perceptions will change. All information on this channel is on a take it or leave it basis, and although we do highly encourage questions, we do not entertain debates because you cannot debate our experiences any more than we can debate yours. This being said, there is a reason I'm doing this podcast now based on a comment thread on one of our other podcasts. I'm not going to share this to belittle anyone or shame anyone. I am sharing it because it is a prime example of a lot of the observations we have shared all throughout our work, and the prime reason we have moved the bulk of our work over to Patreon away from the YouTube trolls. This person I will refer to as commenter. This person said, I agree that the left is overrun by communists. However, there are communists claiming to be on the right as well. I have read a great many of your books and honestly do not understand why you are not pointing out the Hegelian dialectics that is being played out against people right now. Overall, it is disappointing that you are speaking as if there is a virtuous side to be chosen here between the two parties, and I question your motives in doing so. This was commenter's original statement. Hours after the fact and after quite a few responses, they edited their response to make themselves look better. Now, this is a statement. This is not a question, although they implied a question that they had in their mind along with an adjudication about our motives. In my response, I replied with their implied question in mind. You are disappointed because we are not pointing out the Hegelian dialectics. Well, I have something about it in my book Advanced Teachings, and I'm sure that we have talked about it in some of our earlier videos. You are also disappointed because you think we are talking as if there is a virtuous side, which if you had joined us over at Patreon, you would know more than you know right now that would blow that limited notion out of the water. So, you question our motives because you haven't read or heard enough of our work. We actually have many videos about this malady of jumping to conclusions with limited information. We have over 600 podcasts and over 30 books. We cannot do a recap of everything that we have discussed in our work over the last 4 years. It is for the listener to do your own homework, whether it be our material or others, before jumping to conclusions. If you choose to be disappointed, then aim that disappointment at yourself because we have done our part, you haven't done yours. To which they replied, that was an intentionally obtuse response to a simple question. By obfuscating the truth, even once you do a disservice to the truth in and of itself. That is the bottom line. You assert that mentioning Hegelian paradigms in the past somehow frees you of the burden of truth when you insinuate that this current political puppet show involves an actor that is doing anything for the people besides pushing them towards the same planned agenda that his so-called opposition has in mind. You know it does not. I posed a question that could have been answered rather succinctly with the space and time you spent above. Instead, you choose to address me and my information base. This is what I find most amusing, since I began this conversation granting you the benefit of having, at the very least, just as much information as I. I am a patient person, so I'll rephrase my question and pose it once more. Why are you speaking as if Donald Trump isn't working for the same powers as his so-called opponents? I replied, my answer was not obfuscation in the least. You are asking why we are not pointing out the Hegelian dialectics right now. We don't because it's obvious to anyone with half a brain and some education. We have also already covered it. Once again, over on Patreon, we have covered our perspectives of what we see going on, more than just what we are covering here on this channel, and those presentations would more than likely answer your question. Therefore, I don't have to answer your question because we've already answered them. You just haven't seen it. We've already dedicated the time and energy into sharing it. We shouldn't have to toss more time and energy to satisfy you because you are unwilling to digest what we've already produced that would answer your question. Do you like repeating yourself to others that didn't hear you the first time or choose not to listen to you the first time? I'm not being a smartass when I ask this question. The reason we do the deeper presentations on Patreon is because we see a bigger picture than a lot of other people do, and what we are seeing and what we understand is not something that we are going to share with the trolls on the other side that monitor this channel to give them insights. There are also things that we can't see, and Patreon is a place for all of us to discuss with others so we can all share perspectives to see a greater picture outside of the purview of the trolls. Are you a troll? My initial statement stands. There is a lot of our work you are obviously not aware of, and your initial comment shows that you are not aware of it because you have not familiarized yourself with a lot of our work that goes into details of this war on consciousness that goes outside of the political spectrum. This isn't from us just dreaming shit up. This is from decades of doing the battle and experiencing it. What everyone else is seeing right now is a different aspect of the war, and it is only a blip in the grand scheme of this war against tyranny. So if you want your questions answered, then come join us over at Patreon. View the expanded stuff we have over there, and if that doesn't answer your question or answer it to your liking, then we will be more than happy to answer it in a format away from the trolling eyes on YouTube. Their final response, which fails to answer my direct question, is this. I repeated myself in an attempt to receive an answer to my question. I even rephrased it, and once again you attempted to make it more complicated. Forget Hegel. My question is about Donald Trump and why you are pretending that he isn't serving the same masters as his predecessors. Once again, you cite time constraints, yet obviously have more than enough time to hammer out another wall of text littered with more needless personal attributions. I ask one simple, easy answered question, and your response is long-winded, roundabout allusions that the question wouldn't need to be asked if I had more information or didn't have such a limited perspective. Just like Jesus did. Oh, wait a minute. Good teachers don't do that. Good charlatans do. And you're asking me if I'm the troll in this conversation? If your sincerity was in question before, I have my answer now. Of course, they kept coming back and responding over and over again. So we finally just banned them from the channel because there's no point in continuing to allow their trolling on our channel. Now, with the definitions I provided before sharing this exchange, what are your thoughts? Why don't you think about this? They didn't ask me a question initially. They made a statement about Hegelian dialectics and the fact that we didn't bring it up this time. I will add, nothing was said in their original statement about Donald Trump. I answered the statement honestly and truthfully as if it had been asked a question. We have already addressed this stuff in an area that this person has not seen. I also explained why we have the other forum. They have every opportunity to go to the other forum to make themselves more aware of what we present that would answer their question. I even invited them over and stated if they go over and listen to the other stuff, I'd be more than happy to answer their question on that platform away from trolling eyes. Yet they say I'm the one who's sidestepping the issue. I guarantee they have not read any of our work as they claimed, or else they would know and understand what this forum is about. They would know that everything on here is take it or leave it. They would also know that everything on here is just our insights and everybody else must do their own research. And they certainly would know how to ask a question rather than make a statement with an implied question within. They did, however, refuse to answer my question when I asked them specifically if they were a troll, and did so in typical troll fashion. Look at the shit that the left does all the time with name-calling and disparaging when they don't get their way. They disparage, they make personal attacks, they name-call, and all sorts of shit. Does it sound familiar? Their second response, they did state a specific question which still had the same answer because we've already addressed it over on Patreon and we were not going to address it on YouTube. That was an honest response that I explained, but obviously not to their liking. We have pointed out this type of limited human behavior in much of our work. What this reminds me of, and I do love analogies, is this. If you walk into a movie and miss the first half of the movie, are you going to call the director after the fact and ask him to remake the movie because you missed it? No. Would you call him and ask him or her to tell you what happened in the part of the movie that you missed? I very seriously doubt it. More than likely, you will suck it up, go watch the movie in its entirety, or ask someone else to describe it to you. The same point applies here. We have already produced the work that addresses the statements and their question. They are more than capable of going over to our other platform and seeing the productions to answer their question. So if they were genuinely interested in the answer, why would they react the way that they did unless they are in fact a troll with the entitlement mentality? Nothing I said was untrue or obfuscated. I'm just refusing to jump when trolls say, "How high?" Endel and I spend a lot of our time studying, researching, observing, then either writing scripts or recording podcasts and making videos that takes a hell of a lot longer than it takes you to listen to it, just so others can have a better understanding of what we see, feel, and know. We've been doing this on YouTube for over 2 years, and my channel has only been monetized for a brief period of time, so posting here is not and has never been about making money. Over the course of time, had YouTube ever paid us for the brief period of monetization, we would have made a whopping 50 cents. The reason we have 30 plus books and 600 plus podcasts is because it is a very large and broad picture, more than you and I can even fathom, and more that can be contained in a single book, let alone a 20-minute video podcast. The implied question and the actual question weren't simple questions, and all of them have been answered across multiple podcasts because it is being shared as we begin to see and understand, as we take in and contemplate more information. The limited human thinking that we've all been shackled with through the eons of psychological manipulation can't understand the necessity or complex answers or how gray those answers really are. Questions may be simple, but answers to larger concepts cannot be understood in simple responses, and to try to simplify it to those still spellbound by the psychological manipulation, as illustrated above, will do more harm than good. Here's another analogy. If you get your purse or wallet stolen and the cop asks you to describe the perp or perpetrator, drawing them a stick figure on a sheet of paper succinctly sums up how a simple answer provided to the implied question would have been in comparison to the stick figure for the cops to know who mugged you. This is why it's taken multiple podcasts to cover the answer to a seemingly simple implied question. Since we're doing so as we gain more information and see a more detailed picture, think about the stick figure with boobs and curly hair as opposed to just the stick figure, we are sharing our insights after receiving and processing more information. Obfuscation is to make something unclear or to obscure it. Disliking an answer isn't obfuscation. Directing someone to the location of the answer rather than rehashing multiple podcasts also is not obfuscation. Expecting someone to rehash something after they have been directed to the location to find the answer is an entitlement mentality. One of the reasons that Endel and I limit the amount of information that we share, and we have explained it in many podcasts and in our books, is because one cannot learn to think critically or to ask critical questions if you're not given the opportunity to do so or to explore what you get on your own. If he and I told you everything we know or think or see or whatever, that doesn't expand you or anyone else. It leaves you reliant on the external source of information rather than allow you to explore the answers you get for yourself and use other perspectives as a platform, and only a platform, to expand your own internal critical analysis capabilities. The commenter said a good teacher wouldn't do what I did, but from my direct experience, the best teachers I've had were the ones that made me do shit for myself. The ones that did everything for me didn't teach me shit. So it sounds to me more like an entitlement mentality. If you only take what is given to you without earning any more on your own, such as discovering knowledge, then the person generally truly knows nothing, but simply becomes a parrot for the ideas of others. The left-wing robots in this country illustrate exactly what kind of echo chamber mentality that produces. One of the key psychological attributes of seeing through the bullshit in this world around us is observation. We also have many podcasts about this over on Patreon, as well as learning about perceptual filters. Observation is done to take in information. It is not the same task as contemplation, which is processing information. If you are jumping to conclusions or measuring against what you already have in your data store in your head or getting emotional, you are not observing, nor are you contemplating. All of this has also been addressed in many podcasts over on Patreon and in our books. I've said this before in a previous podcast that there is never a time that any of us will ever have all the information to fully assess the situation. We may process the information we have at hand and come to an idea or have a thought or opinions about it based on what we know, but more information will paint a larger picture, which is why it is necessary for us to be in constant observation mode, so as more information comes in, we could alter our perceptions based on the expanded picture from the new information. Most people, and this is a part of the psychology behind the war, only take in a minute amount of information, jump to or draw conclusions, then root in those perspectives in their mind, in spite of additional information that may come to light, which can alter the picture and expand one's perceptual awareness. Refusing to expand yourself once you've obtained more information is what we've been programmed to do through psychological principles. It is only through breaking those internal psychological habits that one can free themselves cognitively to see a much larger picture. We live in a soundbite society, and most people operate under the mindset that if it takes more than a few minutes to relay information, it's not worth their time. I want you to think back to the analogy of the stick figure. How much information is contained within that stick figure? The stick figure itself only represents a human. If you want the person to know if the person is male or female, what would you need to add to chronicle that information? Since you are attempting to describe one person to another so that an identification could be made, you would need to determine gender, hair color and style, race, age, height, and weight at minimum for someone else to be able to make a semblance of an identification. If it takes that much information just to narrow the field to identify a person, how much information do you need to process actions and events? How much information is required to see a bigger picture with multiple parties? Do you think you can get any of this in a mere soundbite? What we're looking at here is layers upon layers, wheels within wheels, and billions of players over large expanses of time just to get a bare glimpse of the tyranny we are fighting against at this moment in time. The levels and layers of tyranny are so thick and compressed that it's difficult for any of us to see or feel, but without knowing and understanding the minds of the tyrants, what hope do any of us have in eradicating it? I will tell you what that hope is. That hope is for each person that expands their cognitive abilities beyond the psychological manipulation and becomes sovereign within themselves and wakes up their inner sleeping consciousness, gives us an additional ally in this war against tyranny. That is what this channel is about. If you want to understand what is going on and what we're up against, then read The Art of War. The tyrants that have been controlling us know these principles in that book, as do the lesser tyrants fighting against them. And those of us that seek a world without tyranny will need to understand the principles if we have any intention of eradicating tyranny. But before we can eradicate tyranny, we must understand the principles of no trespassing and self-responsibility. We must know who we are as sovereign conscious beings rather than subjugated humans who could only parrot what we hear, in contradistinction to using logic, reason, and expanded awareness to become more than what humanity presently is. We have our Patreon channel where we are sharing our work, and it is educational material to help others teach themselves how to become their own authority. There's a $15 per month patronage to have access to all our videos and podcast material. A $5 per month patronage will give you access to all our videos and podcasts that we produce before we move to Patreon. This fee is also to deter trolls like the example I used in this presentation, so we can have a constructive and productive sharing of ideas, teaching, research, and support for those doing the hard work of growing and expanding themselves. Anyone who thinks education should be for free should ask their college instructors if they work for a salary or not, or the school teachers at any level. At the barest minimum, learning and teaching both require a substantial investment of time, and we have invested more time into what we do than any millennial tit-sucker getting their education paid for at taxpayers' expense. For those of you doing the work, stay the course and don't give up on yourself.